Yeah.
Okay, so Angelina Bennet is the former president of the BAPT, and it's great to have her back here again this year, this final day of the conference 2021, and this subject of trust. Thank you, Angelina.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak again. And hello to everybody who's out there listening. What I was going to talk about was the subject of trust, because this year and last year have been unusual, to say the least. And it really brought to the fore this idea that people have had to be trusted to work from home, and also trust themselves to work from home. So the question of trust really came to the fore in my mind, because I was hearing quite a lot of stories about some organisations that were struggling to bring this trust to their employees, and they were making them fit, spyware stuff into their laptops so they could measure how they were working and take screenshots every now and again to see what they were doing, and the bad atmosphere that caused. And I had one friend in particular who was subject to that, and she's just left the organisation because it made her feel so rotten. And then there are other organisations that have really embraced it and allowed for more flexible working with it and trust their employees to do things. So, and that's made people feel good and empowered. So it sort of came to my mind this year, and as I've sort of gone through it, I decided I wasn't going to. I'll tell you in a minute what I was going to talk about and how I've changed my mind, because again, we find ourselves on the second year of having the BAPT conference in the Zoomiverse. It's okay, it works, it's got advantages. We've got people from all over the world, bigger audience than ever, people can join from different time zones, so all that stuff's great. But there are some other things that maybe are slightly disadvantageous. So I wanted to explore the idea of trust in this environment. Okay, so I want to launch a quick poll before we start. Richard, I think you've got the poll. And the question is, how familiar were you with the other conference attendees at the start of the conference? So before you joined, did you know anybody here? Yeah, so if you can just give us a quick indication of that. You have to tell me what's happening with it, Richard, because I've just...
94% voted now. I think we're about to finish. A couple more seconds, last chance, and I'm going to end it now.
Okay.
Results.
And do we have the results? So the 6% of people are absolute newbies to the conference, 33% knew a few people, 36 know some, and there's a quarter of the people here know quite a lot of the people, and there are some conference lifers here, so that's interesting to know. And then the second poll, Richard, if you would, is just out of interest, have you ever attended an in-person BAPT or APT conference, or have you only ever attended online? So if we can have a look at that one.
We're up to 85%, 94. Okay, last chance, a few seconds to reply if you haven't already. I'm going to end the polling now.
Okay, so for some it's the first conference that will be online, and so again, about a quarter of the people have only ever attended online, or it's the first, if it's the first one. But then there's half the population here who've been to quite a few in-person conferences and met people in real life. So that's just that's quite interesting to know for what we're going to talk about going forward. Okay, thank you, Richard. So let me tell you what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about, as I said at the beginning, how remote working's highlighted the importance of trust and really brought it to the fore, and how some leaders have had to learn how to trust their employees, and also have to learn how to lead in a different way to show that trust and convey that trust. There's been many articles written about it this year. So as I was searching it, there was lots of stuff about trust in the workplace and trust in a virtual setting. I was also then going to talk about type work and how maybe type work can accelerate the building of trust in a remote team. So I was going to talk about how type helps us quickly understand differences and similarities. It helps us understand what motivates us. We could use type to think about how people are working. So E and I in terms of the environment, or J and P in terms of how they might structure their day. Communication style adaptation. So there are 100 things we could do with type that would help in an environment like this. And then I thought, this audience knows this already. If you don't, and it's Sunday, you should know it by now. So I decided I wasn't going to talk about that. And then that very last final point about can type work accelerate the building of trust in a remote team, I started to really question that as well. So that's why the presentation became do you trust me, and 20 other questions, because the introverted intuition went mad, and it was like, what about this, and what about that, and what about this? So I started really questioning what that would mean in this virtual setting. So yes, is this still the case in a hybrid or remote organization, or do we have to start thinking differently? So some of the questions that were coming up for me were, would people still get the same understanding of type in a virtual environment as they would in a live setting? And some of the things that I think are beneficial in a live setting are you almost sense the energy of a group when you're with your type-alike groups. Even if you come in as a non-believer, which many people do, they start to say, actually, there's a resonance here. Or if they end up in the wrong group, they're like, I don't feel like these are my people, I need to be over there. So you miss out on that almost like energetic vibe that you get, for want of a better word. You also might be confined to type-alike groups. So we've done quite a lot of stuff in type-alike groups, breakout groups. So, you get to talk to people of your own type, but you don't really get that feel for the people who weren't in your group. So you might hear them report out, but there's things that you get in a real life process where you might look at the process that your, extrovert group went to tackling a certain task, and then look over and say, oh, like how interesting, the introverted group are doing something pretty different, so you actually get to observe their process. The other thing I thought was that there's none of that, even though we've got the virtual bar, which I'll come to in a minute, there's none of that just general mingling that you get in a type session over the tea break, of people saying, oh, it's interesting what your group was saying, and just getting that personal touch. So my feeling was that in the virtual setting and using Zoom and breakout rooms and things, there might be the possibility of creating more silos in type and more divisions rather than promoting understanding. It'd be interesting at the end to hear what other people's views are on that. And so I've come into this like completely with questions. I don't know, I'm not coming in with any expert views, and I'm using it as a bit of an inquiry into what the feelings are and what your experiences are on this session. So the final thing that I'm probably going to address at the end is, do we need to work differently with type in the virtual world? And I don't mean just structure our sessions differently, but really think about what we're doing here and how people are going to be impacted. So I decided to take a bit of a leap of faith and use this conference as a sort of live inquiry. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's what I'm calling it. So if we parallel the idea of this conference with an organization, which is why I asked you the poll questions at the beginning. In any organization at the moment, you'll have people who have been there for a very long time. They've worked together in person. They've met each other. From this conference, people have quite a few people there have even stayed at my house, the brave ones. So there's some people here I know very well, people I've met at other conferences. So I fall into that category if I was in an organization of being one of the people who would have been there a lot. And I've been to a lot of the international conferences. So I'm a fine example of somebody who in an organisation would have been the one that's been there for 100 years and knows everybody. But we also know there are people who are joining organisations completely new during this virtual time. Their onboarding's being virtual. And last year, one of my main jobs was helping onboarding for people who are starting new roles. But of course, it was all virtual. And most of the people I was working with were the senior leaders, the CEOs, the board members. So people in really senior positions as well, having to do all this remotely and think about how they can lead. So I'm thinking of paralleling this conference with an organization. So we have people like me who've been here forever. Lots of you met people in person. Some of you may have been to 1 or 2 conferences and had the personal touch, or done a few online conferences and started to get to know people. And for some of you, I think it was 6%, this is absolutely your first conference, so it will only be online. But for many of you, it's only been online. So it's going to be a similar experience as joining an organization where there might be already cliques, groups, familiarities, and how have you managed to get in there? So I hope that's making sense. Yeah. Okay, so before we go into that inquiry part, I did promise that I'd show a couple of models, and being an introverted intuitive, I actually can't function unless something's underpinned by a model. So I'm going to just like illustrate why it's important using a couple of things here. So one of them is the Lencioni 5 Dysfunctions of a Team model, which I think many of you will be familiar with. And the premise, I often introduce type sessions with this idea. The idea is that any well-functioning team needs to have a basis of trust. Okay, so trust is fundamental in this model, but I'm going to just look at it from the top down. So the idea of any organization, any team, any group is they want to produce some sort of results. They want to get an outcome. So our results here at the Type Conference, it might vary slightly from person to person, but generally we want to be here to learn more about Type, learn more about ourselves, maybe do some networking, which is trickier in this setting. So that there's a result that we're probably all aiming for that would tell us that, yes, this has been a good conference for me. Then there's the accountability underneath that, which is where we all have to participate in this. So the idea is to get that excellent conference experience, we all need to work with each other, be willing to share, be willing to listen, be willing to challenge. So it's a collective experience, a Type conference. It's not like some other academic thing where you're spoken at. It's very much a learning from each other. And then there's the commitment, which is, again, that common cause to learn about Type in the best way possible. And underpinning that, you've got this idea of the conflict and the trust. And sometimes they go hand in hand, that you might at times want to challenge, or there might be presenters who are challenging other conceptions. We might want to take some challenging questions. And in order to be able to challenge and enter into healthy conflict, you need to know that there's a basis of trust. You need to know that we're all doing this because there's a common purpose and we're trying to get the best out of it. That sounded a bit sort of thinking preference way of describing it there, but yes, it's for your own good. You're going to get that result even if it hurts. So so the idea is to like have that conflict but without it hurting, and that's where the trust comes in. Okay, so trust really important for even the success of our conference, seeing us as a group. The other thing I wanted to bring up as a model, and I think Roger had Jabari Window in his presentation yesterday. It's Roger. Is that we create trust by being open and trying to fit more into this open area or arena. So the idea of the Jabari Window, many of you know it anyway, is that there's an open area, which is where what I know about myself, and this is what other people know about me. Okay, And coming into an organisation or a type conference new, we've all our types written up there, which can say some stuff about us. We talk about where we're living in the world, so that can say some stuff about us. But the more we can get into that open arena and get known, the more trust we'll start to build with people. Then there's the blind spot, which are things that other people know about you that you might not know about yourself. So that could be some insights about type that you get as you go through the conference. It could be, so to use myself as an example, one blind spot I had as an INTJ was people used to say, oh, you're so stubborn. I think I'm not stubborn, I'm open-minded and this is excitement. No, you're really, really stubborn. And I had to take that and really think about it. And by God, I am so stubborn. The stubbornness was directly related to the introverted intuition of, I've had this idea, I've been brewing it and stirring it and polishing it for a while. Now I'm going to tell you what it is, but it's a done deal. Yes, my idea, it's finished. I wouldn't have talked about it unless it was done. And then people start saying, oh, you could do this with that, you could do this with that. And I'm just like, no, shut up, get off my idea. And that's what they were experiencing as stubborn. Even though I wasn't saying it, they could read my mind and my face, which was just like, so that's why the blind spot, it requires, again, that trust to say, okay, someone's saying something here. It may not be true, but it's their experience. Am I going to listen and learn? And then it ends up in the open area or arena as well. The hidden area or facade is where it's stuff that other people don't know about you, and it could just be that you haven't got around to telling them. There hasn't been the opportunity, it hasn't been appropriate, or it could be things that you're not comfortable yet sharing. So again, there's a bit of a trust issue with that. And then the unknown, who knows? Hopefully this will be the bit where we get insights as we go through the conference together, from working together, things that we hadn't realized before, new insights, new questions. Always come out of these things with more questions than answers. So the unknown is quite an exciting place to be. But again, this is where that commitment part of the Lencioni pyramid is important, because we need to all be wanting to help each other to learn, to be open, to build that trust, to get the good result and the good conference and the good learning what we want. So it all sort of ties in together. And again, this has come up a few times during the conference, the concept of psychological safety. Are we building an environment here that's psychologically safe, that's allowing people to have those insights, to have that sharing, to trust what they might be hearing from other people? So yes, lots of questions. So before we move on to the next bit, where it's going to be discussion, is there anything significant in the chat or any questions that I need to deal with before we move on, or comments? No, nothing burning. Okay, great. So what I'm going to ask Richard to do in a moment is open the breakout rooms, and there's going to be 5 people in each breakout room, random, not type assigned or anything, so 5 randomly assigned people. And what I want you to do is take turns, 1 minute each, uninterrupted monologue style. So no comments from the other people, just listening from the others. To talk about how familiar were you with the other conference attendees? So pretty much, how did you answer that first poll? And have you done any in-person ones? So where are you in that sort of hierarchy of being a lifer or a conference version, or only a online attendee so far? So just to get an idea of what your familiarity and contact is with people. And then how have you how has your welcome been? And this might be a bit tentative if people haven't felt particularly welcome. I hope you all have. But how has your welcome been, and what sort of things have made you feel welcome and helped you to be open if you are new to this group? And if you are a long-time conference lifer, to what extent have you made the effort to connect with some new people on the conference, or have you sort of hung out with your gang that you've spoken to? And I know certainly from my experience, as the Zoom window opens, I've been sending little private messages to people I've known before going, oh, hello, so-and-so, it's nice to see you again, and blah, blah. I think the one person I've actually managed to make a connection with who's new was Nathan. I don't know if he's here today because he's in Montreal, but that was only because we were in the bar at the end of one of the days. And it sort of highlighted to me as well the importance of those informal things. So if you've attended the bar, or whatever it's called, the hangout room at the end, please bring in the experience of that and how it's different too. And just how open have you been? What's enabled it or inhibited it? And do you feel able to challenge or disagree? Because sometimes people who are newer to type might feel daunted challenging someone who's been in it for a while. But quite frankly, none of us have the answers. Types are very, both and maybe-ish. Yeah, so how able have you felt to challenge or disagree? Okay, so the rules are 1 minute each, speak uninterrupted, move on to the next person. There's a couple of extra minutes for wriggle room. So I think I've allowed 10 minutes in total.
Okay, I'm going to open the rooms now then. You have to click through to accept to get into the room once this comes up. Okay, they should be open now. Anyone that gets stuck in the main room, let me know and I'll allocate.
Okay. Richard, do I go into a room as well? I've been invited. It's quite nice to see everybody. I'm just interested, we can't go through each group and see what was said, but I'd be interested to see if there are any like themes that jumped out. So from the group I was with, there were some type-related themes about how somebody's type might impact their ability to challenge. There was some talk about how interacting with people in the bar or getting to know them more personally, personal details that might come out during the breakout rooms was helpful. There was some talk about how if you had an important organizing role in this, it's made it more difficult to have any time or space to connect. So it did make me think of things like, the leadership of an organization during a busy time when things are virtual. Yes, there might be an induction program, but is that you have your 10 minutes with the new employee and then you don't connect with them again, and things like that. So I'm just wondering if there were any interesting points that came out from any of the groups that make you think about how would this be if this were an organization.
Angelina, this is Sterling.
Yeah. Hello, Sterling.
One of the things that came up is how much gets missed when you're remotely from a lot of the little tiny interactions that happen. For example, at a type conference, when you're sitting at a table with other people, there's crosstalk, meaning that there's a talking across when the speaker sometimes talking chuckles or, oh, that's so true for me, that you get locally, or knowing looks, or, as someone starts to huff, right? You get those looks and you get that kind of cross interaction, even while the speaker's going, that is just not possible during a Zoom interaction, because otherwise if everyone's mics are on and you're not doing that, it doesn't work very well. So that's something that's missed. You can pick up some of the bar stuff and some of the other components, but that is not something supported very well by the Zoom interaction.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And there is something about Zoom as well that's very, you have to take turns in communication, which has always been something introverts quite enjoy, up to some extent. Even I'm bored with it, but it must stifle the extroverted process. Having to take turns and things like that. There's a couple of things popping up in the chat. So a group of 5 people were first or second time BAPT conference attendees. So I'm taking it they would have all been only meeting virtually in this thing. Yeah. So some of the side conversations. Any other comments or points of note?
Angelina, yeah, one of the things that came up is just that it is a fairly trusting community, and it we've got our codes up there, so people are able to share authentically. And I guess the piece that jumps out for me is, seeing the difference between persona and how people look and what you assume about them, and when they actually share what's going on inside them, is really revealing and encouraging, but allows us to connect on a level that when I just look at people's faces, I make different assumptions, and it's really powerful to understand what's going on inside.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, because for many people, they might be having, all the people I talk to about how are you working virtually and how will you adapt? And they say, oh, we communicate loads of meetings. But you can sit in those meetings, and if nobody ever really gets to know you because there's no room to share or have those personal touches, there might be people making assumptions about you and just not getting to know you. So it is really important to have that time. I find in these Zoom meetings, you sort of get on, they're timed, people take turns, you follow the agenda. You can't just sit and talk rubbish to people like you were saying, Sterling, side conversations over the cup of tea. That for me, that's all missing. And there is quite a lot of research saying, you build trust by getting those personal touches, getting to know people's, we've all got to know each other's cats and dogs and stuff on Zoom, but also by showing vulnerability. So by, meeting someone over the tea saying, I'm not understanding a word of this either, and then you've bonded. So, yeah. Okay. John Haxton often talks rubbish on Zoom. Never, John, never talk rubbish. You're always wise. Okay, so
can I just interject one comment, Angelina,
just to
say that I've got one or two things now in the diary for next week with people that I've connected with just through being at the same session over this weekend. So do feel free to do that. Do step into that, because as somebody with an extremely strong introversion preference, that's really comfortable for me. And so do build the relationships from here, because we hope that the conference won't be it, as it were, but that this will be the beginning of relationships rather than just a one-off.
Yeah, and usually, I've built some really excellent relationships over the last few years with people, and my Angelina Hotel is lacking all its guests this year as well. Usually, we've got people all over the house, and yeah, and the pub is missing your custom, everybody, too. So the pub's next door. Fantastic. So there's a few more interesting comments coming into the chat box, which I'll let you look at. But if I share my screen again, hold on, where is it gone? Okay, is that coming up? Right. So this isn't exactly a survey, because I couldn't make it work, because what I'm hoping to do is collect your ideas and maybe write it up and see how it informs the questions that we have about how do we need to work differently, and to actually get some real mileage out of this. I would need to know, are you in the category of being new to this, only online, what's your type, and all this stuff. And quite frankly, it was like a two-way or a four-way ANOVA thingy. John Haxton will probably correct me. So instead of a survey, if you do have any ideas about what creates psychological safety. David just said, we think we're quite a trusting community, and I've always felt that. And personally, I think it's because we're all here with a common interest to start with. And we're curious people. We want to explore and talk about type, and probably got a bit of a human touch thing going on. So that would be my take on it, is some of the psychological safety is built on the fact we have a common purpose and probably a similarity even within all our type differences. But it would be interesting to just collect any thoughts in the chat that people might have, and I will deal with these afterwards and maybe write up an article for Typeface or something or other. Okay. So my question, one of my 100 questions to myself was, do we need to work differently with type? Because quite often, and Roger Pearman alluded to this, someone will give you 2 hours to fix a $2 million problem, as he said. So it's like, in the olden days, it would be, would you come in and do an afternoon with our team on type, which was never enough anyway, but you could possibly make it work. So my thoughts, and I'd be interested again to collect anyone else's views in the chat, are that in this remote world, I think it is essential to have one-to-one sessions before bringing people together as a group. For all the reasons we've said, you can't speak freely, you can't express yourself freely, you can't move around. And you want to make sure people are actually understanding type. And you don't know as well with Zoom if people have like gone off doing something else, or they're shopping on Amazon and they're not really listening, and they're like, oh, introverts, boring. Oh yeah, that was it. And you know, they'll only remember we're not boring, we're exciting. But they'll only remember like one or two things that were said. So one-to-one sessions before team events, I personally think are going to be absolutely essential and a must that we insist on. And possibly also insist on having a series of sessions, not a one hit. So something we come back and we revisit and we talk about again, and really try and make type the language of a group. I also thought it might be nice to give the groups sort of homework to explore type with each other. And this would enable that bit more small group activity where people can speak freely and use their time as they want, instead of like we just did, you know, you've got 10 minutes in a breakout room to answer this question. Actually set them other things to say, I want you to all meet up for a while and just talk about, I don't know, how you chose your last pet or something, you know, whatever it might be, something personal that they can talk about outside of the session. Oh, I just went ping. Also, when working with type, maybe ensure that all breakouts aren't type-alike groups, so that you have some exercises where you're deliberately mixing up the types so people can get that little experience of when someone who's really different to them says something they would never have thought of, and they're like, oh, you're cool, I want to work with you more, which you wouldn't get if things were only ever type-alike. So they were some of my thoughts about how literally with type we need to work differently. So I'm interested in any others. And then I was wondering as well, if somebody asked us to come and work with a team on type, do we just go, yeah, let's do type? I'm thinking, no, I think we need to do other stuff. It's been a sort of an obvious thing for a long time that there needs to be sufficient trust and psychological safety in a group to make a type session successful. So we might have to more deliberately say, first of all, we want to have a session with the team exploring common goals and objectives. And if you remember that Lencioni pyramid-y thing, getting that idea of what are the results people want, what's the commitment level, what's their accountability, their willingness to participate. So almost working the pyramid backwards a bit to assess whether or not there's going to be trust. So rather than go in purely with the type session, have another session before doing other things, and create that psychologically safe environment, however you do that. I think that's another topic, because I don't know the answer. And really just make sure that you feel that there's sufficient trust in the group, but also that you're working closely with the leadership of the organization or whoever's called you in, and maybe spend a lot of time helping them understand type and how they can use it, so that they're really supportive of the whole sort of underpinning of the type. I remember once going into a type session where the leader introduced it to his team of, oh, you're going to love this stuff. It's really great. It's really helpful. When I came across it, I never knew I was so judgmental until we did this. And I just thought, you know, how'd you come back from that? You know, you have to be polite because they're the customer. So really spending time working with the leadership and making sure they know what this is about and that they're supporting it for people is really important. And also the personal touch exercises, the icebreakers, the things that get people talking personally. One of the favourite ones I ever saw of this was when I was working with the organisation formerly known as OPP, now the Myers-Briggs Company. And we had a team day where we had to get into groups of 3 and create a Venn diagram. So that already tickled my fancy because I love a Venn diagram. And between the 3 of you, you had to find in the middle bit, what do you all have in common? And then in pairs, what have 2 of you got in common that the other one hasn't? And then in the outer ring of the Venn diagram, what's unique to you that you don't share with the other 2 people? I just think that's a really lovely exercise to, it takes a while, but to get that personal connection, to get people talking, and also to get that idea that later on you might find that you were the same type as someone, and you know, that was that, or that you were a different type of someone, but you have the same personal connection and interest. So I think it's going to be essential to bring some of that stuff in to help bust the stereotypes, and to also take our work into a place that's, it's just not just type, it's type and you as a person. So they were my couple of thoughts on that. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the chat. I'm going to open it up for questions in a second, but before I forget to say it, you've got the rest of today. We've got some awesome speakers coming up later in the day, and I just would like you to self-monitor, having had this like overt conversation about trust and bring it up to the fore. Has it changed how you experience trust for the rest of the conference? So that's a rhetorical question to self as you go on. Okay, God, I feel like I've talked too much, so I'm going to stop sharing and open it up to any Q&A. Oh, I see there's lots of stuff happening in the chat. So, Richard, are you able to catch the chat and save it for me?
It will save at the end, yeah. What I was wondering about whether should I stop the recording now and then we just have more of an open conversation?
Yep.
Okay, I'm stopping the recording.